What does it really take to build an empire from scratch? Well, for ancient Egypt's 18th dynasty, the answer was written in blood, in gold, and in a religious revolution that almost tore the entire kingdom apart. We're going to dive into the incredible story of how a fractured land became the ancient world's first true superpower. A story of epic conquest, radical faith, and secrets buried deep in the sand.
Okay, just picture this. A single pharaoh leading his armies on 17, that's right, 17 brutal military campaigns. He pushed the borders of his empire farther than anyone had ever dreamed. It's an absolutely incredible feat of strategy and, just pure grit. But honestly, the number of campaigns he fought isn't even the most amazing part.
This is. The number of battles he lost? 0. A big fat 0. In all of those campaigns, this pharaoh's army was never, ever defeated. I mean, that is the kind of absolute dominance we're talking about here. It's what turned a kingdom into an unstoppable imperial juggernaut.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did a broken, partially occupied country transform itself into the ancient world's first real superpower? To find the answer, we have to go back to the beginning, to a time of total chaos.
See, before this golden age, Egypt was a mess. It was not the unified empire we all picture. It was a fractured kingdom, and a huge chunk of it was actually under foreign rule. But out of that chaos, a new dynasty was about to rise up and change everything.
So our story really kicks off in what historians call the Second Intermediate Period, which is just a fancy way of saying it was a time of major instability for Egypt. The big turning point comes around 1550 BCE. A prince from the south named Ahmose I decides he's had enough and launches a war of liberation that will kickstart the entire New Kingdom era.
You see, for more than 100 years, these foreign rulers from Western Asia, known as the Hyksos, controlled Lower Egypt, the super-fertile Nile Delta. And they had way better military tech, like the war chariot. They'd even set up their own capital, splitting the country in two. For the Egyptian pharaohs ruling from the south, well, this was a humiliation they just could not stand.
Ahmose I didn't just fight harder, he fought a whole lot smarter. He basically stole the enemy's most powerful weapon, the horse-drawn war chariot, and turned it right back on them. Now, this wasn't just some new toy. It was a complete revolution in warfare. It gave his army incredible speed and mobile firepower. And with it, he booted the Hyksos out of Egypt for good, reunited the two lands, and laid the foundation for an empire.
With Egypt finally united and secure, the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, well, they weren't just going to sit back and relax. Nope, they started looking outward. They were ready to build an empire on a scale the world had literally never seen before, and they did it using two very, very different approaches.
So the empire grew in two distinct ways. On one hand, you've got Hatshepsut, one of the most powerful female rulers in all of history. She focused on making Egypt rich, launching these massive building projects and incredible trade expeditions to the far-off land of Punt. But then on the other hand, her successor, Thutmose III, was a pure conqueror. He just marched his armies into the Levant, what we'd call the Eastern Mediterranean today, over and over again to expand the empire by force.
Historians actually call Thutmose III the Napoleon of Egypt, and for really good reason. His non-stop military campaigns pushed the empire's borders to their absolute greatest extent, bringing in massive amounts of territory and tribute from all the kings he conquered. He was the military genius who really turned Egypt into an imperial powerhouse.
So the dynasty was at its absolute peak, unbelievably rich, powerful, and it seemed like nothing could stop them. But then, a shock to the system. A pharaoh came along who would challenge the very soul of Egypt and throw the empire into a massive religious revolution.
You have to understand, for thousands of years, Egyptian society was built around this huge, complex pantheon of gods. You had Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, Osiris, god of the underworld, Isis, the divine mother. I mean, these gods weren't just statues. They were woven into every single part of daily life. And their priests, especially the priests of Amun-Ra, had enormous wealth and political power.
And then came a pharaoh named Akhenaten, and with one jaw-dropping move, he basically said, nope, all the old gods, they're gone. The temples were shut down, the priesthoods, especially that super-powerful cult of Amun-Ra, were totally disbanded, and all their wealth was taken away. A religious tradition that was millennia in the making, outlawed just like that.
So what did he replace them with? Well, Akhenaten brought in what might just be the world's first ever state-sponsored monotheism. He ordered everyone to worship a single god, the Aten, which was represented as the physical disk of the sun.
It was radical, it was disruptive, and boy was it unpopular. It shook the entire empire to its core.
Akhenaten's crazy revolution, well, it didn't last. After he died, the throne passed to his very young son, a boy whose name would become more famous than any other pharaoh, Tutankhamun. And its kid had one massive job: to clean up his father's mess.
Guided by his advisors, of course, he was just a kid, the young Tutankhamun went about systematically undoing his father's entire revolution. He ditched the worship of the 18, he reopened all the old temples, and he brought back the traditional gods, putting Amun-Ra right back at the top. His whole reign was about one thing: hitting the reset button and bringing stability back to a very, very shaky kingdom.
The 18th Dynasty didn't just reshape Egypt in life, they completely rewrote the rulebook for the afterlife too, leaving behind a legacy that still fascinates us like crazy to this day.
Yeah, by the time of the New Kingdom, the age of building giant pyramids was pretty much over. For all their glory, they were basically giant neon signs for tomb robbers, and almost every single one had been looted. So the pharaohs of this new era needed a new plan, a better plan, to protect their eternal journey.
Their solution was brilliant. They found this remote, desolate valley across the Nile from Thebes. The idea was to carve their tombs deep into the rock cliffs, hiding the entrances from sight. It was a radical plan to try and secure their treasures and their afterlives from Thebes forever. And this place became the Valley of the Kings. And even though we've found so much there, including the incredible, nearly untouched tomb of King Tut himself, you just know the valley hasn't given up all its secrets. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? After all these centuries of searching, what other pharaohs, what other incredible treasures might still be waiting for us down there, buried beneath the sands?